Yeah, yeah. Yeah, go ahead if you want to sit down there. Yeah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the most merciful and compassionate. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's on, right? Yeah, it's good. Yeah. My name is Nicole Beauvais, and I'm the Chair of Public Relations here at IIOC. And I'd like to welcome you all here to the Islamic Institute of Orange County. We're very excited to see you all here because it means that you all are serious about civic engagement as much as we are here at IIOC. And we know that we all want to see positive change in our government this year. So this is a crucial election year for us, and IIOC is committed to bringing important and informative programming to this community. Tonight we're kicking off our lecture series by defining our terms and taking a serious look at the reality of the Muslim experience in America. Coming up on May 2nd, IIOC will still also be co-sponsoring a regional candidates forum that's going to be held at ISOC, our neighbor in Garden Grove. Later this summer, we hope to do a panel of all the major political parties so that our community understands where they fit in the political spectrum and to help them be conscientious voters. As the election gets closer, we hope to do more candidate forums here at IIOC for the local government elections. Civic engagement is very important to us here at IIOC, and we strive to have a good working relationship with all the local, state, national representatives. If you're interested in being a part of our team and helping us work on these kind of events, please see me after the lecture or give me an email. We need to get more and more Muslims involved in this process, and that is one of our goals here at IIOC. And the only way we can achieve that is by your participation. IIOC would like to thank CARE for helping us co-sponsor this event this evening, and I would like to welcome Asma Ahmed, who is from the CARE Greater LA office, and she will introduce our speakers. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you for coming.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. As Sister Nicole mentioned, my name is Asma Ahmed. And I'm the policy manager. And I'm the policy manager at the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Greater LA Area Office, CARE LA. And thank you so much, and I'd like to welcome you all to our event, Challenging Islamophobia with My Vote, with Khaled Beydoun and Hussam Ayloush. And would also like to thank IIOC so much for partnering on this event. They're one of our greatest masjid partners, and they're always, they really strongly believe in civic engagement and getting our community more civically engaged. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers. Right here is Khaled Beydoun. Professor Khaled Beydoun is a leading scholar on Islamophobia, national security and anti-terrorism law, and civil liberties. He serves as an associate professor of law at the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law and is senior affiliated faculty at the University of California, Berkeley Islamophobia Research and Documentation Project. He is a critical race theorist. Professor Beydoun's research has been published in top law journals, and his recently published book, American Islamophobia, The Roots and Rise of Fear. Can we get it? Yeah. This is what it looks like. That's what it is right here. And then our other speaker tonight is Hussam Ayloush. He is the executive director of the Greater Los Angeles chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations, CARE LA, and he has been since 1998. CARE is America's largest Islamic civil liberties group with regional offices nationwide and 4 right here in California. Brother Hussam frequently lectures on Islam, media, relations, civil rights, hate crimes, and international affairs pertaining to American Muslims. He has consistently appeared in local, national, and international media advocating and articulating the mainstream Muslim position on various issues. So with that, we're going to get started. The format of the program is going to be that I'm going to be the moderator, and I'll be asking our speakers a bunch of questions, and then we'll take questions from the audience, from all of you. So my first question is for Professor Beydoun. Professor Beydoun, we know that you are, as I mentioned, a scholar, an academic, an activist, a community organizer. What inspired you to do this work, to get into this field, or these fields?
Can you guys hear me? I don't think I need the microphone. I speak really loudly. So.
I think
Oh,
for
you're recording?
for the recording they might need it.
Got it, okay. So thank you to the organizers for having me. Inshallah, this will be a fruitful conversation. So what inspired me to write this book? For the last 5 to 6 years, I've been closely researching the war on terror. I've been closely researching Islamophobia as we know it today. I've also been researching the underpinnings of what we know as Islamophobia today, that rise from white supremacy, that rise from this really embedded culture of Orientalism that existed for centuries. And one thing I realized as an academic is a lot of my work that I was focusing in on wasn't trickling down to people that I want to read it, right? It was being read by other scholars. So I really was keen on writing a book that could be widely accessible to a broad audience, to be read by Muslims, but also non-Muslims. So the book is written in a way that is extremely accessible, really readable. The second reason why I wrote the book is there weren't a lot of Muslims talking about Islamophobia in the mainstream media. And when Muslims were talking about Islamophobia in the mainstream media, they weren't critical. They were framing Islamophobia as a relatively new phenomenon. They weren't tying it to the law. And I was uniquely situated as a scholar who was examining, I teach constitutional law, I teach the First Amendment, I'm closely familiar with the Free Exercise Clause, religion, and so on. So I wanted to tie what was happening with this rise of Islamophobia that was being, I thought, narrowly connected to the Trump moment to something far deeper, right? To something that was far more embedded and far more extensive. And that's what really inspired me to write the book. And I grew up in Detroit, and many of you guys know Detroit has a huge Muslim American community, which has really been on the front lines of the war on terror and surveillance for a long time. So I bridged my legal expertise with my personal experience to write a book from a specifically Muslim perspective.
Great. I think is the mic still working?
I think the battery might have went out.
Would you like to answer the next question, just, because you have a carrying voice?
No, I think what's happening with a strong voice too.
And actually, my next question is also for you, Professor Beydoun. So Islamophobia is just one form of structural racism. How does it relate to white supremacy and other types of structural racism? And if you'd like, you can use this.
Okay. I'm a professor, so I'm used to standing and walking around when I answer questions. So how is Islamophobia related to white supremacy and other forms of structural racism? It's a difficult question, but I'm going to provide you with a nuanced sort of response. So I was the first law scholar that defined Islamophobia in a very specific way, right? I sort of define Islamophobia along 3 dimensions. The first dimension of Islamophobia is private Islamophobia, right? The sort of bigotry, animus, violence, fear that is inflicted by private individuals. And when I say private individuals, I mean bigots, hate mongers, individuals like Craig Hicks, who killed the 3 students at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill a couple of years ago. Private Islamophobia is extended or unleashed by individuals who are directly connected to the state. The second form is structural Islamophobia. Right? Structural Islamophobia specifically hones in on policies, laws, programs that are unleashed and enacted by the state. So it's critical to understand Islamophobia as being structural or state-sponsored, because then we can understand policies like the Patriot Act, we can understand policies like counter-radicalization policing, we can understand policies like the 3 travel bans, we can understand policies like see something, say something, as an extension of Islamophobia.
which is a really critical step because it allows us to see Islamophobia as a structural sort of system that is not only coming from the right, and by the right I mean conservatives, Republicans like George W. Bush or Donald Trump, but also programming a policy that is also coming from the left, the Obama administration. Third, Islamophobia is also a dialectic, whereby state policy, and state policy is based on these stereotypes, these presumptions that Muslim identity is connected to terrorism, communicates specific ideas from equality. If the law is telling you that Muslims should be suspicious, then that's effectively instructing the citizenry to partake in this project of policing Muslims. Three-part definition of Islamophobia is really critical. How is it tied to white supremacy? Because the objective of the state, both contemporarily but also historically, was to effectively position and orient Islam as being antithetical to whiteness. In this book, is this too long? Professors talk for a long time, very, very long. I apologize if I talk for a long time. But in this book, and it's really important to frame Islamophobia from a historical standpoint. It's not a new phenomenon, right? It's not something that is specifically tied to Trump or any one president. So I'm going to talk really quickly about this law, and again, I'm very descriptive in the book. From 1790 to 1952, whiteness stood as a prerequisite for citizenship. Now, it's critical to know that whiteness rested on Christianity, right? And Islam was effectively oriented and positioned as the antithesis, the opposite of Christianity, and thus whiteness. So Muslim immigrants coming to the United States for centuries were denied citizenship because they couldn't convince or persuade a judge that they were in fact white. So white supremacy is at the core of Orientalism, the system that othered Muslims in Islam, which is the mother of modern-day Islamophobia, right? So that's how it's anchored in white supremacy from a historic standpoint. Contemporarily, we can see how Islamophobia functions to carry forward the broader project of white supremacy through very vividly the travel bans, right? What are the travel bans saying? That if you're a Muslim coming from 7 or 6 Muslim majority countries, we don't want you in this country because the objective is to maintain the white majoritarian integrity and demographics of the state. So we can't talk about Islamophobia unless we anchor it and frame it as structural state-sponsored programming, and we can't talk about Islamophobia unless we really establish it within this foundation of white supremacy and the objectives of carrying forward white supremacy. Sorry if I was long.
Thank you. So my next question is for Brother Hussam. Brother Hussam. Thank you. Brother Hussam, Professor Beydoun mentioned the Muslim ban. Could you expand a little on that and some of the other ramifications of Islamophobia that we've seen on a national, state, and local level?
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam rasulullah. First of all, I want to thank the community here, thank the masjid, thank Sheikh Muhammad Faqih, Sister Nicole, and the board, mashallah, for always making the space available for the community to get together and learn. This is so crucial for us. We often complain about how others depict us or how others try to marginalize us, and the most we can do most times is vent, maybe over social media or social gatherings. But that's never going to solve the problems. The problem requires that we get informed and then use that information, that knowledge to organize collectively within our community and with other communities and take action, mobilize. So this is the first step. The first step is really understanding who is attacking us, how they're attacking us. And I think we are very, very fortunate to have one, in my opinion, one of the most prominent and informed scholars on this issue within the American Muslim community. The issue of Islamophobia, issue of racism, how they're connected, and how they are implemented or used to change policies. How they're used to change, not just to make your life miserable in a social way. You know, some crazy bigot shouting at you because of your hijab, or because you look brown, or you look black, or because they think you're Muslim, or you think you're different. That is bad, but that's something we can overcome easily. The problem is when they change policies, when they create structures of racism that aim to marginalize us as a community. That's when it's dangerous. And then we have to understand that so we can fight it back. The Muslim travel ban, which was signed as an executive order by the president back in January of last year, over now a year and plus ago, is an example of that. Of course, his biggest fans say, well, this was not, and he claims, it's not anti-Muslim. Well, we don't even need to interpret whether it was anti-Muslim or not, just quote him. He was the one who said during his campaign, Trump would be calling for a comprehensive shutting down of Muslims coming to the US. He also talked about registering of Muslims. He also talked about Islam hates us. I don't know, Islam talked to him, I guess. He said Islam hates us. The reality is, what we understand from the president or candidate at that time, it's a clear attempt to limit the number of Muslims coming into the US, go full force into deportation of those he can find a way, so push many out, and for those who are remaining here in their own country, so we don't need anybody's favor to accept us in our country, but for those who remain here, make their life miserable. Keep them busy, keep them on the defensive, make them easy targets. So these are part of the policies that we deal with. Obviously, there's a long list, and I'm really going to try to limit. I'm not known for being brief, but I'm going to try to be brief, because I really, like you, I want to benefit from the presence of Dr. Khaled Beydoun here, who used to live here in the area, and we lost him. Alhamdulillah, we're glad he's here back for a visit. Inshallah, we'll try to find a way to keep him here. We'll talk to maybe UCLA and others, inshallah, to have him back. But since he's here, we want to benefit the most out of him. One thing that I will use as an example, and I don't want to elaborate much, is in terms of how law enforcement has continuously dealt with the American Muslim community. You know, we as American Muslims, and this has nothing to do with Trump, by the way. This existed under Obama. So those of us who cheered for Obama, same thing. We have been dealt with as a suspect community until proven innocent. If anything happens, you have to prove. When you stop at the airport, when you arrive from overseas, you have to prove that you're worthy coming back to your country in ways that no other person has to. When you're traveling, you have to prove that you're worthy on getting on an airplane. When the FBI visits you at home, you have to convince him he has no reason to continue scrutinizing your life or going to your workplace. If you're an American Muslim youth, especially male, young Muslim male, you have to prove that somehow you're not a secret or underground terrorist. And this is dangerous. Obviously, for us, it might be something new. For our brothers and sisters in the African American community, this has been their story, the story of their life. So for us, it's something new. We're learning about it to basically, you know, they talk about driving while black. You know, we have driving while Muslims now, flying while Muslim. We're slowly joining that you know, VIP club, I guess, of America. And an example of law enforcement is something we're all familiar with. You know, how many of you have heard the term CVE? How many of you? Not enough. This is what targets you and me and my children and your nephews and nieces. It's the program called Countering of Violent Extremism. It's before Trump, Obama's time. And the purpose of it sounds really good. Who is against countering violent extremism? You know, we're all for safe, harmonious society and country and the world, right? The problem with that program, which is a very law enforcement program, mostly DHS with some DOJ, Department of Justice and Department of Homeland Security, mostly targeting, is actually exclusively targeting American Muslims. And what it is based on the premise that somehow being a Muslim makes you more prone, susceptible to violence. In ways, for example, that a white Christian wouldn't be. Although statistics collected and gathered by the Department of Justice prove, not us, prove that the #1 cause of domestic terrorism and violent extremism in this country is white supremacism in this country. And yet there's no program to watch and monitor violent extremism within white neighborhoods and white communities. You know how many hundreds of Jewish American kids are recruited to join the Israeli occupation army? Hundreds. Every year they leave their country, they leave America to go join with an army that is engaged with no debate in major violations of human rights. And maybe some would argue, and I'm one of them, war crimes. And yet people in America leave this country and go there. No one has ever established a CVE program to see why would normal Jewish American kids leave their home and join to be part of an army committing war crimes. Why? But none of that is happening. They go to the American Muslim community, although again and again we've seen the numbers of Muslims who join extremist terrorist groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda is very, 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 very tiny. Very tiny. Not justifying these tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions. But again, the point is going back to the question that Sister Asma asked, and that is stigmatizing American Muslims, making us feel that somehow we're guilty, we're suspect, and making worse, making the rest of the country feel that there's a reason, there's a need to scrutinize this community. So that's why fighting Islamophobia is not just about us feeling good. It's not just about me being able to go to the supermarket or drive without feeling threatened. This is important, but it's more than that. It's about the future of our existence as proud Muslims in our own country.
So you both mentioned that Islamophobia has been around for a while, definitely long before the Trump administration. So this question is for both of you. How has Islamophobia changed from the Obama administration to the Trump administration? Can you point to any particular changes that we've seen?
So it's changed considerably. I think, kind of piggybacking, dovetailing off of what Hussam was saying, the Obama administration, specifically President Barack Obama, was very clever in the sort of rhetoric he engaged in. Remember when he began his administration, he gave this wonderful speech at Al-Azhar in Egypt, wonderful speech talking about how it was his objective, his administration's mission to kind of mend the wounds of the war on terror that was effectively unleashed by the Bush administration, right? Beautiful speech. He won over Muslims both domestically, he won over Muslims in the region and so on. And Obama was being championed by Muslims as this, kind of a new age, a new archetype that promised a better future for Muslims moving forward. Now, the rhetoric was great, right? The language was great, the presentation was great, the performance was excellent. We believed him. In addition to him being a transformative president because he was black, right? We championed him as being this new progressive moment in America's history. Some people talked about it being a post-racial America and so on, which is a bunch of fiction. But juxtaposed with the rhetoric of Obama saying things like, Islam is a beautiful religion, we have to mend the war on terror, we're not genuinely in this clash of civilizations moment, is policy that was really detrimental, right? Policy domestically that was really detrimental, but also policy abroad that was really detrimental. I'll start with the domestic policy that Hussam told us about really effectively, that is called counter-radicalization policing, right? Counter-radicalization policing is effectively this new policing model that we adopt from England, where effectively the theory says that radicalization can only be a Muslim phenomenon. This process of becoming radicalized can only be a Muslim phenomenon. Like Hussam tells us, it's not white supremacists like Dylan Roof or Stephen Paddock who shot up that country concert in Las Vegas, or the kid Nicholas Cruz who shot up the high school down in Florida. Not those guys, they're lone wolves, right? That's what they say about the white shooters. It's not individuals who are neo-Nazis, it's not individuals who want to separate and effectively form their own country. It's only Muslims. We conflate radicalization specifically with Muslim identity, and even more than that, Sunni Muslim identity. Radicalization is framed as a Sunni Muslim phenomenon. Obama adopts this theory, mutates it into a new counter-terror program called Countering Violent Extremism. And the way CVE works, Countering Violent Extremism works, sorry, I was on a long flight, I'm kind of stuttering with my words. Basically, it's the FBI working really closely with local law enforcement, right? It's a chain, if you will. Then local law enforcement works really closely in Muslim communities to develop informants, to develop partners, to develop on-the-ground watchdogs, to effectively keep an eye on individuals they perceive might become radicalized. And in my opinion, right, we sort of shriek and think about George Bush as being this really vile Islamophobe. We now think about Trump as being the most vile Islamophobe. But in my opinion, CVE is the most destructive form of state-sponsored Islamophobia. And let me tell you why that is. Because it works on this basic tenet that by virtue of a Muslim maximizing his or her Muslim identity and effectively practicing their free exercise rights, free exercise of religion clause is in the First Amendment, right? And it's in the First Amendment for a reason, right? The framers of this country thought that the ability to exercise your faith is the most paramount right. It's the very foundation of citizenship. But for Muslims,
who maximize their free exercise of religion, that maximizes the prospect that they're suspicious from the vantage point of the state. This was not established by Obama, by Trump. This was not enacted by Bush. This was established by a president we laud as being progressive and by an administration that we deem liberal. So really critical to understand how Obama's administration can be fundamental. You can break it down to this thesis. The rhetoric and the language was really welcoming, was really tolerant, right? But the policy was underhanded. Domestically, with regard to surveillance, we could also talk about drone strikes in Yemen, for instance, right? And that's the major shift. Trump collapses this wall that Obama constructed and really strategically constructed, relying on clever rhetoric, laudatory rhetoric to bring people in and then spy on them. Remember, he didn't visit an American masjid until his last year of his presidency. And he only did so because he was trying to sell and peddle counter-radicalization, thinking Hillary Clinton would win. And Hillary Clinton was going to expand counter-radicalization. Trump does away with the rhetoric, and he's like, I'm going to call a spade a spade. Islam hates us. It's a violent religion. My programming is going to match the tenor and the tone of the rhetoric. Right? Do we get the difference? Obama, good rhetoric, bad policy. Trump, bad policy, bad rhetoric.
And Brother Hussam, the same question for you. Okay. So then my next question for you, Brother Hussam, is what is CARE doing at the national and local levels to combat Islamophobia?
Sure. We're dealing with it in terms of combating Islamophobia because we have to deal with attitudes, we have to deal with policies, we have to deal with how we internalize Islamophobia. So there's 3 levels. We have to work on ourselves. We need to make sure that Muslims, despite all the hammering, all the attack, all the defamation, all the attempts of marginalization, Muslims don't feel less. That is important. We can't ask others to treat us as equal citizens. We can't ask them not to treat us as second-class citizens when we feel as second-class citizens. And that is a problem, because we do have Muslims who say, well, you know, we do have terrorism, so let's allow them to do that. You know, we have to show Americans. I hear this. I hear people saying, well, we have to show the rest of fellow America that we're doing something to combat terrorism in ways that no other community in America is required to speak up for things they have absolutely no control over. Imagine if we go to the, Irish American community and say, what have you done lately to combat, back in the days, the IRA? Or, hey, go to Italian Americans. What are you doing really to fight the mafia in Sicily and in Italy? They will laugh at you. It's a joke. But it's somehow expected that you, because you're Muslim, you have the keys to the solution of Daesh and ISIS. So we have to explain that we don't owe anyone any explanation or justification for who we are. We are proud Muslims. Alhamdulillah, Muslims are the most who advocates for peace and justice, for themselves and others. We don't need anyone to patronize us. We don't need anyone to teach us our religion. So first is working on the community, empowering it, not just with information, but with the tools that will take us to the next level, and that is mobilizing people into advocacy. We're actually on Monday. I don't know how many of you, Sheikh Muhammad, you're still coming on Monday, right? No. Don't bail out, Sheikh. Don't bail out, Sheikh. I'll come and pick you up. We have the Muslim Day at the Capitol. It's an annual event. It's our 7th annual Muslim Day at the Capitol. We started with about 200. This is the largest Muslim Day at the Capitol in the country, where we have Muslims from throughout the state of California. Last year we had about 800 people. Alhamdulillah, they go there, young and old, brothers and sisters from all professional backgrounds, all ethnic backgrounds, go there, show the beautiful rainbow and diversity of the Muslim community, meeting with elected officials, letting them know we exist, letting them know we're powerful, we're influential, we're active, we're proud, and we advocate for justice, equality for all people, not just Muslims. Actually, most of the bills and legislation that we advocate for impact everybody else, sometimes more than Muslims themselves, because that's where we live, that's what we care about. Alhamdulillah, it's very important because it allows us to change policies. It allows us to challenge the policies we just talked about, dismantle the injustices that exist in a legal or political way. The third one is the public. When we talk about Islamophobia, I'm not as sophisticated academically, I would say I will make it simpler to you. There are 2 types of people. you're dealing with when they suffer from Islamophobia. Islamophobia literally means the irrational fear of Islam. Phobia is the irrational fear of something. Something that is not justified, but it exists. Now, we have two types of Islamophobes. The one who are deliberate, the one who maliciously are intentional. They know you're fine. They know there's nothing to worry about you. They know you're just like them, trying to live your life, do good, and raise your family, and so on. But they don't care that they have an agenda. These are the people who constitute what we know as the Islamophobia industry. They're the ones who try to poison the well. They're the ones who go and tell average Americans, watch out of the Muslim, they're bad. Let's push policies against them. Let's write about them. Let's make their life miserable. Let's push for bullying, etc., etc. These are the ones with an agenda. We actually, the CARE, the Center for American Progress, and many other organizations did a study and found out that actually there are 33, if not 34, 33 entities that are fully dedicated to producing anti-Muslim material in America. 33, imagine, day in, day out. They go to work, the way you go to work, to produce something productive and good. They go to work to actually create misinformation, lies, fake news, false books, false material, produced, for media, for TV, for whatever it takes. They influence politicians, media, books, authors, or semi-authors, pseudo-authors. And these people, with the budget of about $50 million a year, think about that. And this is what we know of. This is what with the foundation we were able to measure. There are many others that are unknown or under different operations, different names. So what these guys do, try to poison people's mind about Islam. So what happens is, we have the polls, when we look at the surveys, depending on the year, Pew, Gallup, they found out that about 2/3 of America, 60 to 67%, depending on the year, on the survey, 60 to 65% of Americans have unfavorable views about Islam. Now, the overwhelming majority of them are, in my opinion, I'm not justifying and I'm not excusing bigotry or racism, subconscious racism, as they describe it sometimes. But what I'm saying is, they themselves are the victims of Islamophobia. It doesn't mean, what it means is, I wouldn't waste my time on the Brigitte Gabriel and the Daniel Pipes of the world, the malicious Islamophobes. But I will try to spend time on my neighbor who fears me for no reason other than he watched Fox News last night, right? These people deserve our attention. So that's where we focus on. We have people speaking, engaging. We train Muslims to speak. We train young Muslims to be proud leaders so they can talk to their classmates. We produce material, books, videos, social media, whatever it takes to change the public opinion, to correct the misperceptions that the public opinion has. And we couldn't do it alone. That specifically, with the political aspect, heavily, directly, exclusively depends on your involvement as a Muslim community. Meaning, you have to realize the only one who can convince your coworker or your neighbor that what he or she holds is bigotry, is wrong, is you. Because you have to let them, you have to challenge them. You should not excuse it by telling them, yeah, I understand, some Muslims have done a lot of bad things, No. This is racism. This is the very definition of racism. When you think negatively about somebody only because they belong to another group, that you have a bias towards them or of them. But that could be done in a nice way. Just don't look at them in the face and say you're a racist bigot. It doesn't work. But you can find a way to let them know. So these are the three areas we focus on.
So, Brother Hussam, you just mentioned one way that community members can combat Islamophobia, really getting their neighbors to know them. So, what are this question is also for both of you. What can local community members do in addition to that to combat Islamophobia, and then what can Islamic institutions do as well?
I'll briefly add to it because I want to hear also from Dr. Khaled. Be part of these activities. Attend so you can empower yourself, so you can engage. There are other events. There's on April 28th, Masih, correct me, April 28th, Manzanar, our annual pilgrimage, not to be confused with the Hajj, pilgrimage to Manzanar. Manzanar is the location of a concentration camp where 10,000 Japanese Americans were held against their will during World War II, when the American government, our government, permitted, an executive order signed by the President Roosevelt at that time, ordering about 120,000 Japanese Americans on February of 1944, towards the end of the war, right? Was it 42? 1944. 42, I think. 42. February 19th of 1942. Taking them from their homes, mostly from California, by the way, or West Coast. Uprooting them from their homes. They lost their property, their jobs, everything. Think about this. Americans, never any of them committed a crime. Not a single one of them was ever charged with spying or treason. Uprooted from their homes and put in concentration camps. So when we go to these events and build bridges and partnerships, when we support and defend the rights of fellow Americans who happen to be targeted because they're black, when we defend the rights of fellow human beings and Americans because they are Latino or immigrants or refugees or, you know what, undocumented even, human beings. It could have been you or me, by the way. There are many Muslims who found themselves in these positions. When we start defending the rights genuinely of those who deserve to be defended, and that is every human being facing injustice, you know what? We defeat Islamophobia. Because we're making it difficult for the malicious Islamophobes to convince the public that we're mean people. How would a person, how would a homeless who was fed from love and with sincerity by a Muslim community, how would he or she ever think badly about you? Never. How would your neighbor whom you help think badly about you? So that's part of it. And we don't do it because we need to prove to anybody, anything. We do it because this is the calling for our religion, right? To enjoin the good and forbid the evil.
And Professor Beydoun, that same question for you.
I'll briefly add to that. I think that, it's incumbent for all of us, to really learn about our history. As Muslim Americans, I think that we can tend to be short-sighted and kind of buy into the idea that Islam is the new religion in this country, that Muslims are foreigners and not indigenous to this land. And that's a big reason why I wrote this book, to show that the history of Islam in this country, in the United States, is extensive. It actually predates the creation of the United States as a sovereign nation. Few people know, few Muslims know, and I speak to Muslim communities across the country in colleges, universities, high schools, elementary schools, and so on. They're shocked when I tell them that up to 30% of the enslaved Africans in the antebellum South were not only Muslim, but they actually practiced Islam when they were bonded to slavery, right? So our history is a noble one in this country. We're not new in this country, and in fact, we've built the infrastructure, we've built the very foundations that this country stands on today. So educating ourselves about our history here in the United States is the first critical step that enables us to sort of respond to these Islamophobic tropes and questions that we get on a daily basis. The question I always get when I'm doing media or speaking to somebody who isn't Muslim is, so when are Muslims going to reform Islam? Right? Why is it Islam being modernized? Why can't it be more moderate? And my response is, do you ask people to reform other religions? And I respond by saying, when are you going to reform white supremacy? When are you going to reform racist laws that are subjecting a whole range of people? When are you going to reform the First Amendment, which guarantees us all the right to freely exercise our faith as they see fit? So our ability to understand our history, right, and understand the Constitution, which we all have claim over, enables us to educate, respond, and grapple with these Islamophobic questions and cultures we have to deal with on a daily basis. And Hussein makes a critical point. I think a critical point that, and I argue with a lot of young millennials about this, right? Young activists will tell me, Professor Khaled, it's not my responsibility to educate non-Muslims about Islam. It's not my responsibility to dismantle Islamophobia. And my response to them is, then whose responsibility is it? Because to be American is to be Islamophobic. And the point about there's a considerable segment of individuals who are victim to Islamophobia is a real one, right? Because think about it. As Americans who are non-Muslims, everywhere they turn, everything they consume, everything they watch, whether it's Black Panther, whether it's Fox News, whether it's some sort of sitcom on television, a commercial, is inundated with a negative idea or image or representation of Islam. So it's actually natural for people to be Islamophobic in this country. And the reality is this: the responsibility falls on us as Muslims and on organizations like CARE, which I'm happy we have them on the front lines doing the grassroots work that they do, to do that work, because they're not going to get it from politicians, they're not going to get it from mainstream media, they're not going to get it, and I teach at a law school, they're not going to get it from their professors. So it falls on our shoulders to spearhead these educational efforts
in these communities, which can be difficult sometimes, obviously, because sometimes they're hostile to us, right? But it's really incumbent upon us to do that educational work, and it starts with first understanding our history in this country, and second, understanding what our rights are as they derive from the Constitution.
Thank you. In your comments, both of you have referred to the perception of Muslims in the media. And this obviously fuels Islamophobia and contributes to it. So what can community members do in a proactive way to change this narrative about us that's in the media?
So the media is really challenging. I'm not going to lie to you. Like a couple of years ago, they were always calling on me to come on the media and talk about these issues. CVE, the travel ban, the Trump campaign, and so on. And I sort of learned that the media isn't the best place to engage in really fluid, critical discourse and conversation about these issues, especially some media, Fox News. Fox News is always calling me, like my mom, right? Do you want to come on Fox News? Do you want to come on Fox News? Here's some money. We'll send you a nice car. But some media outlets are only concerned with getting you on there to effectively rile you up, right? Tokenize you and have you effectively perpetuate these negative stereotypes of Muslims. Yelling, screaming, engaging in this banter, which doesn't lead to any sort of productive value, right? So for me at least, I've chosen not to go on conservative media like Fox. I will do some media like NPR, some progressive media, even some centrist media, and I think it's important for Muslims to sort of occupy those spaces because those spaces enable us, I think, to really have an authentic and organic discussion about these issues. And I think we're seeing that now, right? And I don't want to make this conversation entirely bleak and sort of sad. Even though Islamophobia is increasing, I think at this juncture we're also experiencing somewhat of a Muslim American renaissance, right? We're seeing the real growth of Muslim leadership in a range of places. Whether it be in the media space, there's many trenchant, influential, provocative Muslim voices doing a fantastic job on the media space. There's still some bad ones, but we won't talk about them right now, right? We see this renaissance taking place in the academic spheres, right? Professors at Yale, Harvard, Stanford, Muslim Americans doing amazing work educating a whole host of individuals who are going to become really influential, right? We have politicians. In my home state of Michigan, we have a young Muslim American running for governor of Michigan. They said he had no chance, but he's raised a lot of money and is making a lot of noise, right? So I think we have to be mindful of the fact that media is one space and one platform where we can sort of change the narrative. But I think there are other more fruitful spaces, and the political space is definitely a space where I think we can change the narrative. That's why grassroots mobilization, voter registration, going up to Sacramento and lobbying is really critical. Because the media is always going to be there. We're always going to have cogent voices in the media, but we have to do a more effective job to robustly penetrate these additional spaces.
I'm your local. Actually, I wanted to find out, for the interest of time, what time is the Isha, Sheikh Muhammad? What, 9:30? Oh, good, because I want to make sure we save time to hear questions
Yeah, we
from the
will.
audience.
We'll have about 20 minutes for questions.
Oh, perfect. جزاك خير. دائما مفضل علينا. Oh, it's not 9:30?
No, about
حبيبي.
Okay, so my next question is, we are now in a space where a lot of elected officials are reaching out to the Muslim community and to us, and you mentioned there even, we have Muslims running for office. So given that this is a critical election year, how should, what is CARE doing in response to that, and how should community members be participating in the election process?
I mean, the changes that Professor Beydoun is talking about in terms of how people have changed, how media has changed the way it covers Muslims, actually is most seen in politics, especially in states like in California. I think we feel it more so than others. I mean, there are two things. There's the Trump bump, or the Trump effect, as they call it sometimes, and that is a lot of the people who hate Trump more than they hated us are coming to us now. They say, what, I guess I have to deal with the Muslims now. Because they see us as the one being targeted by Trump, and an additional voice, an additional wave of people who can support in marginalizing the effect and the strength of Trump and his supporters in many states. California is one of them, being a blue state, mostly democratic, mostly liberal, mostly progressive, and this is not to imply whatsoever that there's no Islamophobia within the liberal segments of the communities. I mean, unfortunately, that's why I do agree, being on NPR and PBS and MSNBC deals, at least help educate some of these well-meaning victims of Islamophobia, quote unquote. You know, people who perpetuate the same Islamophobia but meaning well, you know, from an Orientalist kind of, I feel sorry for you type. But besides that point, so what are we doing and how can we benefit from that? So that is one aspect. The one aspect is the changing political map. America today is split, a country, we have a split country, polarized country, due to the rhetoric of the president. Let's keep in mind, he's not just anti-Muslim. He has antagonized every minority. He has antagonized blacks, Latinos, Asian Americans. He has antagonized immigrants, refugees, Mexicans, women, poor white people, you know, educated white people. I mean, you name it. Progressive Christians, Jews, progressive Jews. Everybody feels targeted by him. So what happened? We have a country that is polarized. Smart people know how to maneuver through the polarization to make alliances with people who are like-minded, people who share our values of justice, equality, diversity, and so on. Number two, we see a change within the Muslim community today. American Muslims today are registered to vote, confident about their actions. You know, when people thought after the attacks on the Muslim community by Trump, Muslims are going to retreat, seek forgiveness, please forgive us, please accept us. Actually, we fought back. I've never seen the Muslim community more vocal, more defiant than in the last 2 years. And I've been doing this for almost 25, 30 years now. I've never seen Muslims in your face, Trump, like literally bashing him, bashing the FBI, telling them, stop it, suing. I sued the president. I'm still here. You know, people are suing the FBI. Alhamdulillah, and we don't do it for the sake of doing it. Just to make a point that we are not going to allow anyone to treat us as second-class citizens in our own country. We know what happens when you allow anyone to treat you like second-class citizens in your own country. It's called the Middle East. You don't want that. We don't like that. We watch TV, most of us, or visit, especially, you know, those who make Hajj. You know what it means, you know, to have people treated as fifth-class citizens. So the point is, now Muslims are getting organized politically. Now they're getting engaged on real issues, not just foreign issues. And there's nothing wrong with foreign issues, by the way. It's part of the activism. But now we're familiar with the issues, whether it's education, whether it's immigration, whether it's how the cities treat, you know, vendors, street vendors. Now Muslims are engaged. They're building alliances. Whether they're visiting DC for Muslim Day on the Hill or Muslim Hill Day, or visiting Sacramento. Alhamdulillah, we hear that. We go to cities. Sister Asma attends all these hearings, and she sees Muslims there, active, present. MashaAllah, so many of you signed petitions. How many of our masajid have invited candidates for city council elections, assembly members, their candidates? I can tell you our biggest dilemma now, and I don't want to, you know, exaggerate, but because of the effort that you've done as a community, alhamdulillah, today, I can tell you right after 9/11, our biggest issue was we would have elected officials and candidates call us. You know, we used to invite them to various candidate forums or care events. You know, the typical answer from them was, not just no, by the way, don't even announce we were invited. Wallahi, I can share with you some of these letters. They used to tell us, don't even announce that you invited us to your candidate forum at this masjid or this event. Why? Because it was a liability. It's a political liability. Being associated with the Muslim community was political suicide. So they would say, don't even mention that so-and-so candidates are invited to this masjid or that masjid, because they don't want to be around Muslims. You know what our dilemma, our challenge now is? We can't keep up with them coming to us and say, can you endorse me? And they will go to these Muslim leaders and say, can you endorse me? And we have people running for the same seats, you know, being endorsed by different Muslims, alhamdulillah, because people recognize, candidates recognize, you cannot ignore American Muslims. We're not asking to be treated in any special way, equally, like everybody else. No special treatment. But in this country, it's when you flex your muscle, is when people notice you. And when you organize is when people notice you. You can be millions and millions. If you're not organized, you're worth nothing in the political map, on the political map, nothing. But if you're organized, as they say, an organized minority is more, stronger, more powerful than a disorganized majority. So let's be that organized minority, inshallah.
Professor Beydoun, so what role would you say Islamophobia is playing in the elections, and how are we seeing it manifesting, and what can we do to counter it?
I'm going to be short because I'm really interested in hearing the questions everybody has. But basically, we saw how Islamophobia served as a full-fledged campaign, not only a campaign strategy, right, but it was an entire campaign sort of objective and mission by the Trump administration, right? It helped deliver him the presidency. Even before Trump, we saw Tea Partiers, right? Tea Party types were engaging in the same sort of rhetoric on a state level to win seats. And the discouraging thing is this, is that Trump and the Tea Party has effectively established a win office paradigm or model for conservatives on the right to follow, right? The same, by virtue of scapegoating and vilifying Muslims, by virtue of scapegoating and vilifying brown and black people, there's a high prospect you can win office. So that's the role Islamophobia is going to have in the next, in my opinion, 30 to 40 years, because you might have read polls by Pew that say that in 2045, this country is going to be a majority minority. California is already majority minority. So one way you mobilize white voters, and specifically disaffected, poor and working class white voters, is to talk about the boogeyman. And the boogeyman is going to be Muslims, it's going to be Mexicans, it's going to be people from Africa, these S-hole countries and so on. So Islamophobia, the good news is this. The good news is, as Hussam has highlighted, Islamophobia is finally a mainstream social justice issue, which is good for us as Muslims. The bad news is it's going to be a focal sort of rallying point for conservatives and maybe eventually moderates, to be honest with you, in states that are heavily white and heavily poor to win office.
Thank you. So my final question before we turn it over to the audience, and this is for both of you. So we often hear activists and community leaders like yourselves and like Linda Sarsour talk about being unapologetically Muslim in the face of Islamophobia. So what does being unapologetically Muslim mean to each one of you? And what would you tell the youth and the adults in this room about how to be unapologetically Muslim?
Yeah, so I think for me, Islam is the only religion of the three monotheistic faiths that explicitly, Sayyidina Muhammad's last sermon, peace and blessings upon him, says specifically that anti-racism and social justice is a Muslim mandate, right? It's central to our faith. It instructs all of us to partake not only in the project of fighting Islamophobia, but every form of bigotry. That to me is what being unapologetically, I always struggle saying that word for some reason, unapologetically Muslim means.
And in addition to this, I would say, as a quick reminder, we don't belong to a tribe. Being a Muslim is not a tribe, it's not a cultural thing, it's not just I'm an ethnically or culturally Muslim. You can be defined that way, but at least from a theological perspective, being a Muslim means a lot of things, but at least means understanding what Islam is, seeking the knowledge of Islam. Because before I need to prove anything to anyone, I need to make sure that the Islam that I'm following is the Islam that was taught by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it begins with us, because we're not practicing Islam as a rebellion against racism or against Islamophobia. Some people, that's the path, that's what triggers them. That's good, nothing bad. If what triggered you to learn more about your deen is because somebody called you names and you said, you know what, I'm going to learn my deen, alhamdulillah, Allah guides people in different ways. But once you're on the path, get deeper into it. And remember, you don't need to justify anything to anyone. If you choose to wear a hijab, it's a choice you made, and may Allah bless you and protect you for that. Don't worry about what others say. If you decide to grow a beard, go for Hajj, pray 5 times a day, come to the masjid, associate with Muslims, have views that are deemed quote-unquote controversial. You're not, that is what it means. Means feel free, confident enough to live as a Muslim. Not to make a point to anyone, just between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to make a difference. And I think we've seen throughout history, and one thing that I say I love about this country, and I love about most Americans that I deal with, we in this country respect people with conviction. You know, people who are fluff, nobody notices them, nobody cares about them. If you take your, whatever it is, your conviction seriously, you earn respect. Sometimes you get heat initially, but eventually people come back and respect you. If you have reasons to do it, and you are convicted, you know, you're basically convinced about it, you know, for us, what's better than, alhamdulillah, we're following the hidayah, the guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you stand by it, wallah, I see it at CARE. Muslims, and I have to give credit to the Somali community, mashallah. The Somali community came to this country hard-headed. Islam, you don't play games. You know, when they came to neighborhoods in Minnesota, when they went to San Diego, when they went to Ohio, and they started working at factories and industries, I can tell you there were many generations of Muslims before who came in, and in order to keep their jobs used to be forced to compromise. And I'm not shaming anyone. Allah knows what people's weaknesses and abilities might be. You come in, you have to survive. You know, the Somalis said, heck no. You know, we're gonna fast, we're gonna break the fast on our schedule. We're gonna pray when it's time to pray. We're gonna grow the beard when we want to grow. We're gonna wear the hijab. And you know what happened? What we know as Middle America accommodated. The companies that you think are all, you know, the owners might be racist, you know, we might perceive them that they don't know anything about Islam. These are the companies now that are accommodating Islamic practices. Why? Not because we demanded it here, because the, you know, uneducated, maybe poor Somalis who came in barely spoke the language. You know, I'm talking about first generation immigrants. But they said, you know what, this is who we are. We're not going to try to be, quote unquote, Americanized by giving up who we are. That is what it means. It's really on the practical level, is not a word of challenge to anyone. We're not in the business of trying to challenge anybody. Unless they want to challenge us, then we're ready for them. But it's really, it's about living your life. If you're a student and you need to pray, you need to pray. You tell your teacher, I need to pray. I'm not making a show here. I can't wait till I go home because I'm going to miss Dhuhr. I'm going to miss Asr. I need to pray. I'm fasting. I wear hijab. I can't wear shorts. I'm not going to wear shorts because this is my belief. And when you do that, you earn respect. Wallah, I hear it from people. They say, this is the people you respect. I talk to teachers. Wallah, you talk to teachers, you hear, when my daughter decided to wear hijab, she was 15 or 16. Her non-Muslim teacher, when she told her, I'm going to wear hijab, started defending her, supporting her. She told her, you know, why don't you start designing hijab? Get into fabric, get into fashion, doing this hijabs and so on. She's now doing that on the side. But subhanAllah, why? Because she looked at her and she had a decision to make based on her choice. She said, I respect you more. She's not Muslim, the teacher said, I respect you more because there's something you believe in at a time when most kids in high school, they have not, you know, they're still roaming aimlessly sometimes. But subhanAllah, this is exactly what I call upon my dear brothers and sisters. You know, believe in what you believe in, and if there's one place where we can make it happen, it's in this country. Because we have a constitution, a great constitution that continues and inshallah will continue to protect our rights to do so.
Thank you so much. And now I'd like to turn it over to our audience members to ask their questions. Brother Masi is walking around with a mic, so please let him know if you have a question. Is that on?
They can't discriminate females
So you're going to tell them this moving forward, okay? Yeah, so the question from the sister is, at work, they showed a video about terrorism that focused on 9/11. So basically, they're defining terrorism as exclusively a Muslim thing, right? I didn't butcher the question? Okay, so tell them this. This is all you got to tell them. Tell them that 67% of mass shootings since 1982 have been committed by white men. Give them that statistic. And tell them that if you want to define terrorism by stereotype, instead of statistics, you're essentially a bigot. Because once you look at the numbers, they clearly highlight that the vast majority of terrorists in this country don't look like us, right? They look like Justin Bieber, right? No, I mean, you know, like a white guy, right? Like Dylan Roof, like Stephen Paddock, like Nicholas Cruz, like Timothy McVeigh, like Terry Nichols, right? I can go on and on with the name of white men. Give them that statistic, and if they don't shut up, then I guess they're bad at math.
A quick addition, I would say contact CARE, Brother Masih, and one of the attorneys, because this, in my opinion, this is actually borderline bias that needs to be addressed. I mean, we might be able to at least have them admit that what was shown was wrong. I mean, of all the emergency situations that have happened, they couldn't think of anything over the last 20 years other than 9/11. When we just had Las Vegas, when we just had all the school shootings, nonsense. Obviously, whoever did it has, you know, clear bias. So please contact the CARE office, and I think we can make sure that the next show, the next training, you know, you might have to go through it, but alhamdulillah for a reason. Maybe Allah wanted to use you so we can prevent that from happening to others.
I was about to excuse myself from the classroom because of that, but I want to see how much ignorance there are to keep showing that. And they were talking about Prophet Muhammad that when the ISIS were like in the name of Allah, like the killing and all that. So one of my coworkers asked me, I know they don't care, like I said, that place is most ruled by men. They can discriminate us, but if I thought they weren't discriminating me, or offending me on my religion, on my faith, they know I can see it. So they gotta stay away from me. And once I have the opportunity to say I'm Muslim, I'm proud, they kind of like stop right there. Because I'm not the only one that's meant to do that they are, but I don't know why they don't say it.
Make sure you take his phone number or mine and follow the video.
Any other questions for our speakers?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for your nice information. We really benefit from that one. My question is this one. There is no doubt that we as Muslims, we have to get involved in politics. The problem we have is this. We have families, Muslim families, who doesn't want their children to get involved in politics. So what advice would you give to those families? Especially a lot of immigrants. They just want the doctors and engineers, no politics.
So it's a really good question. The question was, a lot of families don't want their youth to be involved in politics, and they always want them to go into becoming doctors and engineers. So what would you tell them?
I really want to hear from him, that's the thing. I would say getting engaged in politics comes at different levels. You know what, the minute you pay taxes, you are engaged in politics. If you found a way not to pay taxes, let me know. I just paid taxes and I hated it. So
You be the president.
what is it?
You be the president.
Well, he pays somehow, but makes more out of it. But I mean, the point is, if you find a way, yeah, you'll be president. If you find a way, that would be good. Because otherwise, when you're paying taxes, you're handing over your money to a bunch of people sitting in Congress and deciding well, how to use your money. So we're not asking people to get engaged in politics. We're saying stop being selective about it. Stop being, in a way, passive about it. Make sure they get engaged. Now, getting engaged comes to different levels. No one is asking everybody to become a member of Congress or to become Abdul Sayyid, you know, running for governor. Or you can be engaged by being informed and holding your elected officials accountable. Going to the city council meeting every once in a while. You don't have to go every month. See what is happening in your city. You know, talk to the board of education or school board in your area, how it's impacting your children's education. Go to the MDAC. So you can do it on a very part-time basis. So they don't need to quit their careers. They can, inshallah, continue to be doctors and engineers and lawyers and accountants and whatever professions and professors and whatever they want to be. Alhamdulillah, we need those too. But we also need people eventually. The highest level, in my opinion, is actually public service in terms of engagement. We can always ask politicians to do things for us. But eventually, you know, the Arabs say nothing scratches your skin more than your nail, right? Basically, you're not going to be able to make a difference, really, in representing your real values. No one understands Islamophobia more than us. We're not saying people cannot sympathize and be sincere, but no one knows exactly the impact of it. How the sister felt, nobody knows that, except someone who is from that community. So we need people there. We're not taking over, but we need to be there so we can educate. As we educate neighbors and friends, we need to educate members of Congress. Alhamdulillah, we have 2 in Congress. Out of 435 in the House, none in the Senate. We don't have Muslims in the Assembly, in the State Assembly. We need them there. And for that to happen, some people need to say, I'm going to take the next level. Not everybody. Maybe not you, not me. Maybe none of us here. Maybe 1, maybe 2, who can go to the next level.
Just really quick response to this question, if you don't mind, I'm sorry. But I think it's changing, to be honest with you. I teach law school, and I have a large number of Muslim students in my classes. So I think that and law is obviously a pathway towards political involvement. But I don't even think that's the true metric of whether we're becoming politically empowered or not. I think the true metric is making sure that we're registered to vote and to vote, right? I think it's a misnomer to think that we need Muslim politicians to effectually bring about reform or progress for Muslim Americans. I know some Muslim politicians that have bad politics. I'm not going to vote for somebody just because they're Muslim, right? We have to vote. We have to sponsor or give funds to politicians that really have our best interest at heart, whether they're black, whether Latino, whether Chinese, whether Jewish. Bernie Sanders had a pretty positive platform in many respects for Muslims, right? So the real reform is making sure that all of us register to vote, and become a really serious voting bloc that politicians have to come see, right? Have to sort of like curry favor with. And then I think once we establish that foundation, there's a real avenue to see a real proliferation of Muslims running for office. But see, and I really struggle with this, and then this might be too academic, and I apologize, but we're kind of like, you know, experiencing this like neoliberal moment where we measure progress by, oh, we got people who look like us or believe like us in these high places. That isn't always the case, right? We want Muslim politicians, that's true, but we also have to be serious, a serious voting bloc on the ground that can effectuate policy and influence politicians of all sorts.
But what about this? Some of the scholars would say even voting is haram. We have some scholars who say that.
I disagree.
So the question was about some scholars saying that voting is haram.
Let's give their name to Mohammed bin Salman. He will take care of them. Yeah, those scholars don't exist anymore. I mean, this was, in my opinion, this was based on a true misunderstanding of Islam. And Sheikh Muhammad is, mashallah, our scholar, and he can correct that and explain it correctly. But I think mostly it's actually, it was politicized. So the misunderstanding was a small portion, but there was a time when it was needed by these corrupt governments to create an Islam that is tamed, that's neutered, an Islam that doesn't deal with politics, that focuses on how long is your beard, how short is your pant, how long is your miswak. This was an era when they needed to kind of control the masses, so they created a certain Islam to control the masses. You know, now the people who used to do that are no longer interested in that. They're going openly, publicly now. They don't care even about that. So I don't think we hear that in America, alhamdulillah. Most of our scholars, our imams are very enlightened people. They understand a Muslim is a Muslim that makes a difference in society where they're in. They bring goodness to society. Our faith, al-iman, ma waqara fil qalb wa saddaqahu al-amal. Faith is not just what's in our heart, it's what's shown in our actions on other people, how it helps other people. Alhamdulillah, I actually don't know of a single one who says it's haram. And if there's one, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they don't understand the American system correctly, of how it can be, inshallah, swayed for goodness. The others in the Middle East, yani, will rest. Some of us still need to make Umrah one day.
Yes?
We just wanted
Yes.
Yeah, we got like about 20 copies or so. So inshallah, some of you.
Let me make a pitch for that. Actually, here's the thing. We ordered a lot of copies. The company, the publisher, promised that they will arrive today. UPS, not their fault, but UPS actually messed up. So the books might not arrive till tomorrow, which we have actually Professor Khaled Beydoun will be speaking at a care banquet in the Valley. For those of you who are in LA, you get to hear more of him, inshallah, and from him tomorrow. But for tonight, he has 20 books. By my recommendation, here's the thing I'm going to make a pitch for. We complain that Islamophobia is controlling the airwaves, controlling the Amazon books, controlling the bookstores. But that's because when Muslims or when good people or when intellectuals, when fair-minded people produce material, those who should be getting it are not getting it. People buy the anti-Muslim books and material. So what we need to do is, he didn't ask me to do that, and I'm saying that on my own. Each one of us should get a copy of the book. Although we only have 20 copies today, it's on Amazon, right? Available? It's not a lot of money, it's under $25. But what it does, he's not going to become a millionaire out of this. Rest assured. But what happens is it sends a message that there's an audience for this type of material. There are people who think in America. Not everybody is dumbed down the way Trump is. Billions and billions, billions. That's all he talks about. There are people in America, there's a segment of America that I think is larger than we think, that actually cares about intelligent material. So by buying it, you're sending that message to authors who are debating, shall I publish something and spend the next 2 years publishing a book, writing about a book, or writing about a topic? We're telling them, yeah, look, if you do that, look how many tens of thousands of copies are sold. So that's why I urge you, buy a copy. We're going to finish the 20 copies today, but there wouldn't be enough for everyone. Go to Amazon, buy the copy, put some good reviews so we can send the message, and ask your friends and family members to buy a copy. It's an investment. It's a good book, no doubt about it. Great material, one of its kind, by the way. The material in it is a very unique topic. Nobody has covered it in such a depth. But more importantly for me is the aspect, the political aspect of what we're doing today in terms of the impact.
Any other questions for our speakers?
Assalamu alaikum. So I just want to know you guys' perspective, because I'm a college student, and then I see a fine line between college Muslims. They're completely quiet in their zone, comfort zone. They don't want to talk to other people, and there's other college students that are just out there, and then if they dress a certain type of way or something, oh, you're Muslim, oh, we didn't know that. So in your perspective, what would be a perfect image of a college student that doesn't seem oh, he's too quiet, or seem kind of powerless, but also make an impact and have a voice? So in what way should a college student make their image a good Muslim image?
So there is no perfect image, right? There's no perfect college student. When I was in college, I was an athlete, right? I boxed for the University of Michigan boxing team. I went to MSA meetings, and I think that it's positive because other non-Muslim college students were able to see, oh, this Muslim kid's an athlete, which demystifies a specific stereotype. I think it's important for Muslims to be diverse, right? It's problematic whenever we try to effectively confine ourselves as being one way, right? So it's good for you to be, I don't know, if you want to be a hipster, if you want to be a rapper, if you want to be a skateboarder, whatever it is, right? I think it's important to demonstrate to everybody that if you want to study law, you want to study medicine, you want to study pharmacy, whatever it might be, art and so on, I think it's really critical to demonstrate that Muslim Americans are an intellectually diverse tapestry in the same way that we're a racially and ethnically diverse tapestry. So this idea that there's one prototypical way to be as a Muslim college student, I'd reject that, right?
And any other questions? I think we have time for maybe one or two more.
I would like to hear a comment from Sheikh Muhammad.
So no questions then? Oh, one. Okay, this will be the last one then.
I heard this on NPR. America's next generation of Muslims insists on crafting its own story, and it said that they went from defending themselves to defining themselves. So now hearing these comments about the young people, I had this idea that young Muslims were more active and trying to change the image that people have about Muslims, but now I hear this comment. So do you see young Muslims participating more, trying to change the way people perceive us?
Yeah, I think, so what's really empowering for me, and I guess I'm an old Muslim now, right, because I'm staring at 40, so I no longer could be a young Muslim anymore. But what's really empowering for me to see is that, young people in my generation are really taking control of the narrative, right? They're saying, like, look, we understand how this country works. We've studied here. We speak the language. We know the culture. Let us define our own faith. Let us define our own identity in a way, previously speaking, it wasn't us, right? It was non-Muslims and typically Islamophobes who were doing the defining of the terms. So I'm really proud of a lot of these young people in the media space, the academic space, the advocacy space. I mean, we have a prominent civil rights movement icon in somebody like Linda Sarsour, right? That would not have been possible 5 to 10 years ago. She's penetrated mainstream spaces in a way that I think wouldn't have been possible if she didn't speak the language of racial justice, fighting against anti-black racism. The fact that she's addressing all these issues, right, in a way that we didn't have the opportunity to do so before. So these young folks are redefining in a way that I think is really revolutionary.
And if you want to see a true depiction of what you're talking about, go to any college in America and you see some of the most active students now are Muslims, right? On social justice issues, not just da'wah, which is great, not just Islamic Awareness Week, great. Now when they define Islamic Awareness Week, it's including about justice, about social justice, economic justice. Alhamdulillah, I hear that from chancellors, I hear that from school presidents who say some of the most active, some of the most committed students on campus happen to be Muslims. Alhamdulillah, something to make us proud. This is not to say that there aren't challenges and there aren't Muslims who are facing identity issues, fear, anxiety, problems, challenges that need a whole different lecture to address. But alhamdulillah, things are not bleak. As Professor Beydoun said earlier, alhamdulillah, actually, we are facing many, many opportunities. And if we plan well, inshallah, have good faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, work hard, with sincerity, inshallah, and intelligence, not just emotionally, rationally also, we will overcome those difficult days, inshallah.
Professor Beydoun, the sister mentioned NPR. I think you're going to be recording something for NPR tomorrow? Yeah. Can you just talk about the rest of your schedule in LA? I'm sure a lot of people are going to want to come out to the events, and they'd love to know where you're going to be at the next couple of days while you're here.
Oh, when I talk about my schedule, it's really frightening. So I was actually on NPR yesterday on this program called The Takeaway. Tomorrow, inshallah, I'll be on a program called Code Switch. I'm speaking at the banquet in the Valley tomorrow night, inshallah, at 6 o'clock. Sunday, I'll be at the Los Angeles Times Book Fair talking about my book, debating, ironically enough, an Islamophobe who is a proponent of counter-radicalization policing. I debated somebody else not long ago, but we won't talk about that right now. And on Monday, I'll be talking about the book also at Long Beach State. So, inshallah, I have a really busy schedule, but alhamdulillah, it's always great to do this work alongside people like Hussam and Masih and Kara.
Thank you so much. So before everyone leaves, we're going to have a closing dua by Sheikh Muhammad, but I would like to thank our speakers, Brother Hussam, and especially Professor Beydoun. He came here all the way from Michigan, and as he told us, he has a very busy schedule. So Sheikh Muhammad, could you close us out with a dua before Isha?
Khaled, good to have you, man. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Just a disclaimer, this is a care bid'ah right here. Okay, nobody got that. Okay. Closing with a dua. It's a care thing. So I'm doing it on behalf of CARE, inshallah, as one of their biggest fans. And am I still on the advisory board? Okay. I thought maybe you kicked me out or something for not showing up. طيب. So, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We ask God the Almighty on this blessed evening, in this blessed month of Sha'ban, to bless and protect and preserve our community, our leaders, our institutions, our activists, our volunteers, our members, our children, and keep us on the right path. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who call to that which is good and forbid that which is evil. We ask Allah to give us the wisdom and the courage that we need to do what is right and to stand up for justice for all. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who sincerely seek His pleasure and seek reward from Him and do whatever they do to please Him and to benefit other people, not to profit themselves or to advance their own personal agenda. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept the little that we are doing, the deeds that we're doing, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us for our sins. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Almighty, to help you and I overcome our weaknesses, our shortcomings, realize our faults, and cleanse our hearts. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who listen and follow the best of what they listen to. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم ربنا آتنا من لدنك رحمة وهيئ لنا من أمرنا رشدا وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Inshallah, we're going to pray immediately, inshallah, right now. We'll call the adhan in the iqamah, so if you can. And for if we can have some volunteers afterwards,